Hi guys! So this week on Semi-Serious, I want to talk about unconventional therapies. I feel like I should start out with a disclaimer saying that I am not a mental health professional. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, but I have gone to therapy. My mom is a well-respected counselor and counselor educator, so I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about, even if I'm not like a total expert. So that being said, talking about unconventional therapies today, and what does that mean? So therapy is generally defined as a treatment intended to relieve or heal a disorder, but it's more commonly used in its psychological context, which usually entails meeting with a counselor or a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, psychotherapist to talk about and resolve issues with problematic behavior, feelings, emotions, reactions, etc. While it's important to note that theoretical psychotherapy likely got its start way back in the 9th century Persian Empire, what we're going to be talking about today is Western therapy. And the Western history of psychotherapy is fraught with missteps, biases, and outright violence. Ignorance of serious mental disorders led to the mentally ill being treated as demonic or otherwise sinful, and led to them being punished rather than treated. This storied past likely informs a lot of the ways that we think about therapy today, but we'll get to that in a minute. Wilhelm Wundt opened the first formal psychological clinic back in 1879, which arguably heralded the start of therapy as we know it today. But it was Sigmund Freud and his talking cure that history remembers as being the first psychoanalytic or psychotherapeutic pioneer. Freud stressed the importance of the unconscious mind and how it relates to the interpretation of dreams as the basis for his work. Though his critics accused him of rampant sexism and oversimplification, penis envy anyone? Freud's work inescapably set the stage for the future of therapy, counseling, and psychotherapy as we know it today. However, despite Freud's contributions and breakthroughs, there were a lot of flaws with his psychoanalytic approach, and the fallout from Freud's failures, say that 5 times fast, has had a lingering, damaging effect on the very idea of therapy for a lot of people. Even though therapy is a normal and necessary part of healthcare, there are still a lot of stigmas associated with therapy. Here's a quick statistic. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, approximately 43.8 million adults, or 18.5% in the US, experience mental illness in any given year. Contrast that with another common reason to receive medical attention, breaking a bone, which affects around 6.8 million people a year in the US. That means that even though people are about 6 times more likely to experience mental illness than to experience breaking a bone, they still experience more stigma for asking for professional medical treatment to help them heal. If you've ever gone to therapy and told anyone about it, chances are you have heard one of the following responses. Move on. Get over it. Don't be so sensitive. So are you like crazy? I didn't know you could afford that. Why don't you just talk to somebody about that stuff? Don't be sad. Oh man, what happened? But you seem so happy. Now, I don't want to jump down anyone's throat who has had these responses and is trying to help a loved one who is in therapy, but none of these responses are particularly helpful. Would you say the same things to someone who had broken a bone, been in an accident, or was experiencing chronic pain? If not, don't say those things to someone who's going to therapy. If yes, then I guess that's just the way that you are? Sorry? One of the predominant stigmas against people who go to therapy, and the one that I want to talk about most here, is the idea that those who seek therapy are weak. As James Comey said, those are lies, plain and simple. By the time I post this, will that even be relevant anymore? It takes a lot of courage, strength, self-awareness, and perseverance to go to therapy, and to keep going when it's like the hardest part of your day or the hardest part of your week every single week. It's like CrossFit for your soul, except that nobody talks about it. It's like if CrossFit were a fight club, but then that fight club were about mental illness. Oh wait. The point is, as much as I want the stigmas surrounding mental health treatment to go away, wanting it doesn't necessarily help those who are suffering now. And while breaking the silence around going to therapy and seeking help from counselors and psychologists is definitely a step in the right direction, and I applaud everyone who chooses to talk about their mental health journey, that isn't the point of this video. If it's not the point of this video, then why have we spent so much time talking about it? In a similar vein to my last video, which was about suicide, depression, and 13 things to do instead of killing yourself. Wow, that sounds really bad out of context. Today I want to talk about 2 forms of unconventional therapy that I have experienced in my own personal life and my own personal mental health journey that may be helpful for other people. I want to share these with you not because I think that they are a substitute for therapy or that they can replace therapy or counseling with a trained medical professional, but just because they have been helpful for me. And they've provided me with spaces for me to explore my own mental health in a way that makes sense for me personally. Number 1, improv. So, story time. I worked at an improv theater for several years as a waitress, bartender, house manager, whatever, and one of the perks was being able to take the improv classes there that were offered and taught by the founder for free. It took a while, but I eventually got up the courage to try it, and I was pretty much hooked immediately. Not only was it liberating to let loose and be silly and playful in an environment that was specifically geared to facilitate that, it also required me to confront some of my deep-set struggles with perfectionism, appearance, and just generally taking myself too seriously. This was one of the first times that I ever experienced something that was so inherently fun, while at the same time promoting a lot of self-development and self-growth. And as it turns out, my story isn't all that unique. The Atlantic recently ran a story about how therapists are encouraging people to use comedic improv as a way to overcome and deal with their anxiety. It's not a substitute for therapy, as it says. A 2013 study published in the psychological journal Frontiers in Psychology states, "The beauty of improv is that it is quintessentially a collective, cooperative form that rests completely on trust for the spark of creativity that can transport the players, briefly, into confidence-building interpersonal connections." Anyone who has taken part in a good improv class knows this to be true. The class I took stressed the importance of the relationship between the improvisers, the cooperation of everyone on board, the power of active listening, and the incredibly challenging but also super liberating possibilities that arise from being able to let the scene or the game go in directions that you have no control over and couldn't possibly foresee. Perhaps the most important lesson that I learned from the several classes that I ended up taking at Madcap Theater, Mad Fan for Life, was not to be so afraid of making mistakes. Some of the best comedy comes from mistakes, and in a similar way, we can't plan for all of the lessons that we have to learn in our lives. Sometimes we just have to sort of stumble into them accidentally. Number 2, role-playing games. Tabletop RPGs or role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons are a really great way for you to confront some of the things that you're having a hard time looking at directly in your own personal life. This is because you don't feel like you're the one who's dealing with them. You create a character, that character has certain strengths or weaknesses that may or may not match up with your own, and then you go on quests with that character and you have to problem solve things with that character, behave like that character, and it can give you an opportunity to get outside of yourself and think of things from a new perspective. Even though you're the one who's doing the acting, it doesn't feel like it's you. It feels like you can be someone else and deal with things with a new perspective. For me, RPGs have given me a good, safe way to explore my anger, where bandits and zombies and dungeon beasts can meet their maker at the edge of my blade, without me having to worry too much about the fallout from my decisions. Cooperation and teamwork are also super important, as well as the ability to work together to problem solve. But honestly, the best part for me has been exploring and learning how to reclaim my badass side without having to worry about inadvertently projecting any of my issues onto someone else. The whole point is projection. There have been some instances of therapists using role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons in clinical cases, mostly for teens and mostly to help with social anxiety or the development of other social skills like communication or empathy. But even outside of the counseling room, RPGs can offer a great opportunity to explore the possibilities of failure and to develop a sense of resilience when critical failures happen. I will say that in my years of playing tabletop role-playing games, I've had several different game masters or dungeon masters, and they can have a big impact on how easy it is to immerse yourself into the game and therefore how effective the game can function as a form of therapy. But a good GM with a good narrative is pretty peerless when it comes to the possibilities of exploring the caverns of your own mind. Thank thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, subscribe, etc. Let me know if there are other unconventional therapies that you know of in your own life that you like to use. Check out the research that I'll link in the description box down below if you want to learn more, if you want to see where I got my information from as well. If you have a request for my next video, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time.